Hello, I camped here last night, right next to a very busy highway, directly in front of a very busy intersection and a restaurant right across the street. Find out why I did that, what I learned, and what you can learn from my experience. Stay tuned. So first of all, why I did this. Why would anybody sleep near a highway on the side of the road? There's nothing appealing about this campsite really. It's pretty loud, obnoxious, and I'm pretty sure that I'm on private property. I'm in a small community, a one traffic light town, across from a restaurant and a very busy intersection. So why did I sleep here last night? Well, number one, I'm into stealth camping, and the biggest reason I wanted to try out some options for stealth camping. I'm going to be traveling to some ghost towns in Alabama and exploring, and I wanted to have some options for camping. Stealth is almost always an option, but I travel with a hammock now, and I need trees to hang from typically to be able to stealth camp in my hammock. But an option is ground camping with my tarp setup. So I wanted to try that out, and stringing my tarp up as a tent with no trees, nothing to tie off my hammock, but in this case I tied it to my motorcycle and a big branch that was laying near the tree. I guess I could have tied it off to that tree, but I'm trying to consider the fact that there may be no trees where I go camping. Number two, I wanted to push the limits of my stealth camping to discover any holes in my technique. I am not really proficient at tarp camping, which is a kind of a makeshift tent, but since I only carry a tarp and a hammock, I figured I would probably need to get the holes in my technique ironed out before I start traveling to distant locations. Number three, I wanted to push the limits of my ground camping, and this is a pretty good example. I tie it off between my motorcycle and a branch, a fallen branch in the field here. Guess I could have tied off to that tree, but I was really using that tree more as camo, as something to hide behind, so I didn't want to really tie off to that. But also I wanted to push the limits. So I want to talk about a few of the things that I've learned. One of the big things I knew already: ground camping sucks. You know, I'll be 55 in April, and I just don't like getting up and down off the ground anymore, especially at night. I don't like waking up on the ground. I don't like sleeping on the ground. I don't like getting up from the ground. I guess it's just one of those things where the older you get, the less inconveniences you want. And I like swinging, and I have mastered, I feel like, my winter camping, so that's the only thing that's been holding me back from camping year-round in the hammock. Well, that and trees. But this is one of those things where, you know, I've got to figure out what to do when I don't have trees, and that's kind of what I did last night. The second thing I've learned is rigging a tarp to a motorcycle is difficult. It's time consuming. The one thing I probably would consider now is bringing maybe a hiking pole or some kind of a collapsible pole or rod to pull tension away from the bike. I could have rigged it differently than I did, but the main thing for my tent, or for the tarp last night, was to make it stealthy, and that was pretty difficult given the situation. I'm down below grade, below the highway, so I had to pull the tarp up really high. So that was a challenge, and in itself, just throwing a tent, I could have done a really low slung tent and just hung it straight off the hammock and staked it to the ground. But having to stake so high made it a little bit more interesting and difficult. But the fact that I had to learn that last night, it took me 20 minutes to set that tarp up as compared to maybe 5 minutes typically tying it to a tree. or trees or something else. Another thing I learned is you really have to pay attention to your exposure. If you're stealth camping and you've got this much traffic and this many people looking at you while you're setting up, you're really exposing yourself to being exposed. You know, it may not bother 99% of the people that see you down here, but that 1%. So if you can hide from 95% or 90% of the people that are passing by, your chances of being exposed are a lot less. You really don't want to get woken up in the middle of the night by a property owner in this case, or law enforcement. I had a couple of law enforcements pass by while I was walking around the perimeter, so as far as I know, nobody saw me. I didn't get woken up. Maybe it's just a really chilled community here. I don't know. So I think I'm in a bit of a wind tunnel here, and I would like to get, wow, walk-in tent. This is awesome. So this is an unusual situation in that I have to lift the tarp up so high, and I'm tied off to the motorcycle, that a large part of the bottom of the tarp is going to be exposed. In other words, there's going to be a lot of wind coming through here. But if it weren't for the issue of it being so cold tonight, it would not be an issue for me. I like ventilation, but in every other circumstance, this would be fine. The main issue is going to be ground prep. Wow, tent camping sucks. I've spent so much time prepping the ground and prepping the area, and this is probably one of the most extreme examples of stealth camping, because I am below grade. I am below the roadway, and I have to do some extreme adjustments to the tarp to compensate for the extremes. And I may be actually able to get this tarp down a little bit lower. I'm afraid of putting too much stress on this, what I would consider a fairly fragile tarp. But I may be able to do some things like this, pull it down. Not really a tent though, it's a tarp. It's designed to be floating in the air, and you're going to get airflow. I get airflow in the when I'm swinging in the hammock. So, but I'm going to go ahead and get. So I am set and ready to go. All I have to do is blow up my pillow when I want to crawl in the sack tonight. And interestingly enough, it's supposed to be down around 32 tonight, so that's around the freezing mark. I think I'll be fine. It would be nice to maybe keep some of this breeze down. I'm not really sure how I'm going to be able to do that at this point, but I'm hoping to figure it out. I'll tell you what, this ground prep is a huge reason why I hate tent camping. Just getting the sticks, and this is not a bad spot. This is a pretty clean spot. It's right on the edge of an oak tree, so there's a lot of crap around it, and quite a few sticks to pick up. But you know, I only chopped a few I don't know what you'd call these, privet or bush shrub type stuff. I only hope I'm not sitting in an ant bed, because I could easily be sitting in an ant bed. There's a lot of stuff around here that maybe I don't want to be a part of, but I have a I have a blind set up so I can hide my motorcycle. I can hide my camp spot. This is on an extremely busy highway. And I'm going to go up now and see what I look like from the road, just to make sure that this is going to be a good spot. I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night. I don't want Mr. Policeman, the sheriff. I don't want people coming over here and going, "Hey man, what you doing? We're gonna have to take you in, son. You're not supposed to be out here." I mean, all that could happen. I don't think, since I'm not doing any damage, I'm not real concerned about punishment and the wrath of law enforcement. But you know, nobody wants to be woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, which could happen. I would think if I made it to midnight, I would be okay. Crawling in the tent is probably going to be the big thing tonight. So bonking around here in the semi-dark would probably be the hardest thing that I do. It's a very busy highway. It's a small town. But I think I got a pretty good spot here. And there just went the sheriff. That's pretty interesting. So if I can figure out a way to get this bottom sealed up, and maybe a way of getting in and out of here when the sun goes down, and maybe even be able to use my headlamp. I think that's going to be the biggest issue I have, is this thing's going to light up like a, I think it's going to light up like a lamp. Maybe not that much, but I don't know how to get around that. I don't know how to get around using light after the sun goes down. Hopefully there'll be a moon out tonight and I won't stand out like a sore thumb, but looks like I'm going to be entering from around the other side of the bike. It's real tricky walking around back here, but I think I would rather do that than going in from the other side. And I got into some ants earlier. Hope there's not any more in here. That may be the one thing that I can think of where a tent comes in handy. If you're camping on the ground and a bunch of insects, that might be the one thing where, to me, a tent has an advantage. You can zip that thing up and there's probably nothing going to crawl in there. In essence, this is probably one of the worst places to stealth camp, because I have the most exposure. I mean, I guess I could be up on a hill like this. The one good thing is that I'm kind of in a valley, so the first time somebody has a chance to look over this way is a small field. So it's not like I'm sitting right here and people see me miles away coming up this way. It's right here, and they're usually looking over. I would guess they're probably looking over here for traffic, because that's where the activity is. So my best guess is that probably my biggest exposure is going to come after hours with a headlamp. And if I can avoid using the headlamp much, I think I'll be in pretty good shape. But we shall see. So yeah, it's really cold now. It's in the 30s. I'm gonna crawl right in this thing and hopefully warm up. So the question now is going to be, how much does this light show up inside this tarp? Because that's something maybe not so much good to know now, but good to know at some point in the future, I would think. See. So I'm going to step it down one notch. In fact, I am going to try this out, see what that feels like. So I am pointing my red light towards the tarp. See if you can see that. Now, turn my dim back on, turn the red off. So the red is off now. And I am going to put my little hoodie on. Should be something to hang this thing on, but there's not. So I'm about to pack up and get out of here, but I wanted to give you a few tips that I learned last night. I want to talk about a few things that you should know and maybe you can learn from my experience. Number one, you need to cover if people are nearby. You need some camo, you need camouflage, you need some way to break out the outline. When I was setting up, I realized that I had a bright yellow bag on the back of my bike. I had a bright white fender and tank that were visible, so it took me a while to realize that I'm sitting here, you know, I'm a beacon down here in the woods, or at least on the tree line. So I covered up my fender and my tank with my black jacket, and then I took the rest of my gear off and hid it behind the behind the bike. But you know, that was all before I even got the tarp up, and it took me a while to get the tarp up, so I remained exposed longer than I should have. Along those lines, that rolls into number two. Be comfortable with your rig and your setup, your camping setup. Don't figure it out when you get into your little hidey hole, into your camping spot. If you're going to be stealth, you need to be really familiar and really comfortable with setting up your gear. In this case, I wasn't, because I'd never set up a pole pull away from my bike. I've never set up like this, so I was uncomfortable with the rig. Therefore, it took me a lot longer than it should have. I should have been able to get off the bike and pull that tarp, camo tarp, in front of my bike, and everything I did behind it would have been fine. But I didn't do that. So luckily, nobody was upset if they saw me, but I got away with it. Number three is what I would recommend every situation where you're going to be stealth. Be quick getting into your spot and out. So in other words, don't lollygag and take your time getting into and out of your hidey hole, wherever that is. Be quick. Move when nobody's around. It's really hard around here because there's so much traffic, but once you slip off the road and don't cause a lot of attention to yourself, it's not that hard, because it's really there's a very small angle of view here as you're driving by, so being able to see all the way when I'm down here means somebody's looking off to their right, typically. So but be quick getting in and out, and cover up quickly, because the more people that see you acting odd on the side of the road, the more chances you're going to be of being exposed and being called out and asked to move on. Number four, I would always recommend exercising light discipline. In other words, being aware that a headlamp, or if you're cooking, if you're this close, I would say don't cook, don't have a campfire, and be very careful how you use your headlamp if you're using one. It was pretty light out here last night. There was a lot of street lamps that kind of lit the area up. So even when I did use my headlamp inside the tarp, there was enough light flooding the area that I probably didn't stand out. But you can see that I did. It was visible that there was light inside that tarp. And I've never really had to be that aware of what was going on inside the tarp because I've always been far enough away from the woods. But this is an extreme example. So if you're ever in this situation where you have to be close to people, this close and this exposed, it's very open and exposed here. So if you're ever in that situation, just be mindful of your headlamp. And if you're cooking on a stove or something like that, you know, make sure you're aware that that's putting off light. Maybe not a lot, and maybe you can even cover that light source up while you're cooking. So my fifth and final tip for this, and most every time I stealth camp, leave no trace. If you are discovered in the middle of the night, setting up or taken down like I am now, I've made very little impact here other than move a few branches around and pull up some shrubbery, some small pesky little privet out of the ground. Other than that, nobody's going to know I was here. So if I get woken up in the middle of the night and there's beer cans and fire rings and things like that, being that this is most likely private property, if somebody sees a big mess like that, they're more likely not just to run me off, but maybe fine me or maybe even arrest me. So if you're not making a big impact, it's a whole lot more likely that you're going to get away with it if you are exposed. If somebody walks up on you, even a landowner, if a landowner walks up on you and says, "Hey man, what are you doing on my property?" and there's beer cans and, you know, poop and ass paper all over the place and a fire ring, you know, he may press charges. He may call the cops. He may point a gun at you. So, but if you're low impact, it's not going to be an issue. So keep that in mind. The biggest refresher course that I had last night is it sucks sleeping on the ground. So check out my other video if you want about hammock camping and why you should consider switching from tent camping, like something like this, to swinging in between two trees. It's an amazing transition. I highly recommend that you try it out, but check out the video and see what you think. So thanks for hanging out and watching another one of my videos. I hope you got something out of it. I will be doing a lot more stealth camping coming up. I'm also going to be doing some exploring around ghost towns and riding my motorcycle. And if that interests you, please consider hitting the subscribe button and that notification bell so you get a notification every time I put out a new video. See you on the next one.